Switching gears to the latest on the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia claims to have struck the besieged Ukrainian troops holding down the line in the key city or in the key area of Donetsk. A fierce battle taking place for the city of Pokrovsk, in fact, which is called the gateway to Donetsk.
The Ukrainian flag was flown over Kupiansk again, but not merely for another battlefield win. It shocked Moscow, embarrassed Putin, and showed the world that resilience, strategy, and resolve can defeat the second strongest army in the world. Kupiansk was more than a city. Russian goals in northern Ukraine were centered on this emblem, railway hub and Oskol River Bridge. Its return to Ukraine was a nightmare for Russia and a success for Kiev. This went beyond Kupiansk. A much deadlier trap had closed around 1,500 Russian forces in Donetsk. Not only were they losing ground, but they were stranded in hell without supplies, leadership, or hope. Before we explain this bizarre turn of events, like and subscribe to Combat Tech Zone. We provide unvarnished experiences, turning points, and insights from modern battlefields that define war's future. Discuss how this happened. Russia has sent men, machines, and money to Kupiansk for months. The Kremlin nicknamed it the Northern Hammer, the spearhead that would breach Ukraine's fortifications and lead to Kharkiv. Over 1,000 troops, armored vehicles, artillery batteries, and rocket launchers were present. They considered blocking Ukraine's supply lines and pushing Kyiv to move valuable resources north. Putin's designs were often based on sand. The summer went on with massive Russian casualties and little advance. Moscow sent more personnel and machines to Kupiansk every week, believing Ukraine would capitulate if they kept grinding. Ukraine was familiar with this strategy. They defended like iron. They planted broad minefield belts across the approaches, forcing Russian tanks to crawl forward and providing Ukrainian gunners easy targets. Drones buzzed like mechanical hornets over the battlefield, locating convoys, relaying coordinates, and sometimes dropping small explosives onto truck beds. Every time Russian units tried to advance, precise artillery destroyed them before they reached the lines. The cycle was push, bleed, retreat, repeat. The Kremlin's projected summer attack turned into a brutal stalemate, with Russian casualties so severe that official television struggled to hide them. Ukraine realized that retaining ground doesn't win wars. Being patient didn't entail passivity. Ukrainian strategists covertly planned something greater behind the defenses. The reinforcements were transferred surreptitiously at night. New brigades rotated. As promised, Western weapons were arriving in quantity. The Ukrainian General Staff planned up an offensive strike, not merely defense. They created the formidable 10th Corps to deliver punches, not absorb them. Leopard 2 tanks with world-class armor, Bradley infantry fighting vehicles with deadly accuracy, HIMARS rocket systems with pinpoint accuracy, and batteries of modern artillery that could outrange Russia made this corps unlike anything Russia had seen before. Not another squad of exhausted defenders. This hostile fist was gripped and waiting to strike. Kyiv released it in September. The effects were swift and catastrophic. Already stretched and demoralized Russian lines collapsed under the surprise blow. They cracked initially in discrete areas. Trench here, a strong point. Once cracks formed, they spread swiftly. Ukrainian forces advanced steadily. They secured communities one by one before moving on. Fluid tactics included fast-moving armor and troops, drones guiding artillery, and engineers clearing minefields. Ukraine pursued every inch of terrain, and the battered and astonished Russians gave way. A months-long front line collapsed within days. Russian troops fled Kupiansk's city center across the Oskol River to construct a fresh defense. Ukraine went beyond the city center. They advanced, seizing bridgeheads and driving the Germans off the eastern side. A symbolic win, not simply tactical. Moscow's northern defensive line, the Oskol River, was a natural barrier to impede counterattacks. Losing it means losing initiative. Ukrainian soldiers flew their blue and yellow flag over Kupiansk's train station for more than just photos. It declared a battlefield change. Ukraine took the brunt of Russia's attacks for months. The war's rhythm changed. Ukraine owned the initiative. Every Russian soldier seeing the flag footage knew Every Ukrainian combatant who marched through liberated streets felt it. Even though their propaganda indicated otherwise, Moscow leaders knew a perilous new chapter had begun. The liberation of Kupiansk reverberated beyond the battlefield. Russian soldiers observed friends fleeing in disorder, abandoning tanks and supplies in ditches. Commanders sought to rally fractured forces, but desertions and surrenders occurred. Previously hopeless civilians in occupied territories knew liberation was attainable. The message to Ukraine's Western supporters was clear. Their armaments were helping Ukraine win, not simply survive. It took machines, preparation, discipline, and resilience to win. Months of patient prep paid off in days. Defense tools including minefields, drones, and artillery gave Kyiv time to prepare its offensive. When that punch hit, Russian momentum was debunked. Not just another town, Kupiansk. A turning point, it proved Ukraine could break Russian defenses and reclaim important land. Once assumed to be favoring Russia, the war shifted back toward Kyiv. Think about it. Putin was meant to win in Kupiansk. Supply lines met at a railway junction to expand deeper into Kharkiv. Ukrainian forces saluted their flag as residents waved from cellars, and Russian soldiers no longer paraded. The Russian occupation left those people fearing knock-on-the-door interrogations, ration shortages, and relentless shelling for months. Armored vehicles returning to the city signaled liberation. Tank smoke was catharsis as well as damage, a warning that Russia could be defeated badly. In the north, Kupiansk handed Ukraine a symbolic and strategic success, but the south was much crueler. A lethal cauldron in Donetsk, Ukraine, trapping around 1,500 Russian troops near Dorilia. Not fresh, well-equipped fighters. They were weary, undersupplied, and demoralized after months of meat grinder combat. Russians were trapped when Ukrainian artillery and Azov regiment troops blocked their last exit. 3 options remained: submit, starve, or die, fighting in a futile breakout. Reports from that pocket were unsettling. Russian conscripts begged their families for food, drink, and sensible commands in intercepted calls. One guy mumbled that half his battalion was gone and he hadn't eaten in days. Another stated commanders left before the trap closed. Radios dead, ammunition bins empty, drones dumping grenades into trenches. Imagine the chaos. Artillery thundered after flares lit the sky every night. Morning saw additional positions gone and soldiers missing. Ukraine saw psychological warfare at its best. All of this shows what? It proves Russia's attrition strategy, throwing men and machines to the front, failed. Putin felt numbers would defeat Ukraine for 2 years. Ukraine converted battleground into chessboard, baited, waited, and hit precisely. Kupiansk and Dorilia showed that Ukraine now controls the war's pace. Russia can't match Ukraine's flexible, Western-influenced tactics with its Soviet-style command. Russia is bleeding fast as shown by every encirclement, abandoned tank, and retreat. Consider the labor shortage. Over 1 million Russian soldiers have died, been injured, or gone missing since the war began. Replacing them is a nightmare. Instead of professional military, the Kremlin recruits conscripts, prisoners, and foreigners promised money or citizenship. These men arrive at the front with little training, often a single magazine of bullets and little enthusiasm. Compare that to Ukraine's defenders, who are fewer but well-trained, armed with Western weapons and driven by the desire to protect their homes, family, and land. David with precision weapons fights a blind Goliath who falls into his own traps. The alterations in Kupiansk demonstrate their importance. Losing it cost Russia a town and strategy. Kupiansk is needed for Russia to advance into Kharkiv. Supply lines fail without the railway hub. Their defenses fail without Oskol River crossings. However, Ukraine can now advance north toward Sumy and threaten Belgorod in Russia. Putin wanted additional Ukrainian land, but Ukraine now threatens his frontiers. Irony is severe and obvious. Moscow knows. Shouting battles inside Russia's Ministry of Defense are reported, reminiscent of a disintegrating empire rather than a confident authority. Generals who previously strutted on TV as masterminds of special military operations now rage at each other in conference rooms, slam fists on tables, and point fingers like scared schoolboys caught cheating. Logistics staff are blamed for fuel shortages. Another claims the intelligence branch didn't warn of Ukraine's counterattack. A third claims he told everyone months ago, but nobody listened. Under the appearance of discipline and order comes turmoil, coming up to the guys who promised Putin easy triumphs. When the emperor thinks his army is unstoppable, no general dares disagree. For months, glowing reports depicted Russian dominance. Villages conquered, Ukrainians on the point of collapse. NATO supplies too late. However, Kupiansk collapsed and many were imprisoned in Dorilia, revealing the lies. Putin's officers gave him lies, afraid to accept his massive effort had failed. As reality hits them, the generals are devouring each other, hoping to blame someone else. Meanwhile, hardliners smell blood. Ultranationalists, fire-breathing hawks on state TV weekly, want stronger measures. They escalate the war after loss. They demand purges. They demand that army traitors be hauled out and punished, commanders be slain or jailed, and further mobilization waves be released at any cost. They say the problem is fighting the war too softly. They chant burning Kyiv to the ground, while their fighters starve in trenches and their supply lines break with every Ukrainian counterattack. The propaganda machine works hard to reconcile these differences. State television smiles brightly and portrays losses as wonderful moves. They claim Kupiansk was abandoned to safeguard people as if Russian forces had sprouted humanitarian hearts. The anchors said Dorilia was a cunning ruse to bring Ukrainians into a killing zone. Unfortunately, propaganda has limits. Rewrite a map on TV, but not hide funerals. People might say their sons died heroes, yet zinc coffins keep arriving week after week. These coffins speak louder than anchors. Provincial mothers open metal crates smelling of chemicals and death to find their boys transported home as unwanted cargo. Widows receive folded flags and unfulfilled recompense. Only silence answers children's questions about their father's disappearance. Raw films of conscripts speaking about having little food, no ammo in days, and that their superiors fled while they were left behind are on social media despite censorship. One tape shows a dirt-covered teenage soldier claiming he hasn't eaten in 3 days and doesn't know if he'll survive the night. Another leaked call shows a conscript pleading with his mother to phone Moscow to report abandonment. No censorship can strangle this truth. The Kremlin bans accounts, threatens bloggers, and arrests critics to stop leaks. Cracks spread anyhow. It all adds up when the neighbor's son doesn't return, the factory worker down the street is buried with honors no one believes, and telegram rumors spread. Russians see firsthand that something is wrong. Although not yet called defeat, they know it's not victory. Realization causes paranoia in Moscow. What happens to the conflict if the Ministry of Defense cannot hold Kupiansk and Dorilia swallows battalions? Putin will sacrifice who for his own sake? Rumors circulate that some officers will be scapegoated as traitors or cowards. Rumors of arrests and stopped promotions. Finding someone to blame before the rot spreads is more important than mending the army. The war continues. Russia is strong, says propaganda. The generals say the setbacks are temporary. Hardliners say purges will clean the system. However, coffin recipients know better. The trench-starving warriors know better. Over time, the Russian people suspects that Moscow's Golden Halls men have misled to them. In the Kremlin, paranoia grows rapidly. Putin's choice is impossible. Getting rid of his top generals means admitting defeat. Keep them and the ultra-nationalist hawks will turn against him. These noisy, angry, and prominent hawks want tougher tactics and more guys in the fire. However, if Putin leans too far their way, he risks losing his decades-long fear balance. He stealthily eliminates the inferior ranks as usual. Division commanders disappear for treachery or cowardice. Mid-level policemen are arrested for corruption that is unclear. It's not army repair. To defend Putin, feed the wolves just enough. Today's Russian army cracks resemble historical ones. Consider 1980s Afghanistan. Russia's military failures caused political collapse twice in World War I. Tsars fell. Systems failed. Even if the Putin dictatorship may not be over, Kupiansk and Darylia may represent the first major fractures in his wall. War doesn't always end with surrender. The regime that launched them sometimes collapses under its own lies. The message is obvious for Ukraine. These triumphs are about momentum, not simply land. Every city retaken builds morale, gains worldwide backing, and confirms the policy works. Every seized Russian soldier describes confusion, desertion, and tiredness. They want to stop fighting. When the opponent lacks will to fight, the conflict looks favorable. Glance ahead. Imagine how these twin blows, Kupiansk in the north, Darylia in the south, would affect Russia's approach. Their logistics fail, their workforce is shrinking, the propaganda machine is breaking. And Ukraine? Ukraine is smarter, organized, and motivated than ever. Each struggle is a step closer to recovering all of their land, and showing Putin's empire is a myth. Finally, the most remarkable aspect. It's not only Ukraine or Russia, it describes modern war. Flying drones pose a persistent menace. Live data guides artillery. Agility over instructions and infantry. Every military in the world may learn from Kupiansk and Darylia that physical force no longer works. War is won by adaptability, intelligence, and morale, not numbers. In the future, Kupiansk and Darylia may be remembered as the turning points of this war. Ukraine's victories and survivals. When Putin's invincibility melted away. The moments when the world discovered that even a giant can be weighed down by its own weight if it doesn't adapt. So that concludes today. Ukrainian flags fly over Kupiansk again. Azov and others have engulfed 1,500 Russians in misery. Chaos reigns in Moscow, propaganda collapses, and war turns. This analysis was powerful. Like this video and subscribe to Combat Tech Zone. We will continue to reveal the unvarnished facts behind every battlefield twist, the stories propaganda won't tell you, and the lessons shaping war's future. Thanks for watching. See you next time.